whiskeys. So officially welcome everyone to tonight's tasting with the team from Overeem Distillery, the wonderful Mark and Jane. Before I get started, obviously the housekeeping. If you've got 6 glasses to go back and compare, obviously the first one is not a whiskey in the traditional way we're used to, but it is always really interesting to go back and compare and see if you can pick up new flavor notes every time. Or if you're just like me and you only have the 1 glass, that's totally fine too. As usual, please don't drive afterwards. Obviously, hopefully you're all tucked up at home enjoying these samples, but we just do have to make sure that you're all safe. I think we're pretty okay with the ABVs on most of these, but still. All of our tastings are recorded as well for anyone who couldn't join us tonight or who wants to watch them back. They're all on our YouTube channel, and Ollie will send out the link afterwards. But otherwise, I think that's about everything for me. I know I am absolutely not the person you want to hear from tonight. I leave that to our lovely, lovely guests. Jane and Mark, do you want to start us off and tell us all about Overeem?
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our tasting tonight. We're pretty excited to be on. It's been a while since we've done a Zoom.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Oliver and Emma. It's great to be here, and thanks to everyone for joining in. We've got some great whiskies, we think, this evening to share with you guys. A few whiskies from our core range. Obviously, the Floc Shots that was released last week, and then a work in progress or a soon-to-be-released whiskey. And then we're finishing with a big cask strength, which we're excited about. It's going to be a good evening of tasting. But I think the first drink we want to start with tonight is the new make spirit. We like sort of starting a whiskey tasting with our new make, especially through distillery tours and online through Zoom tastings like this. Just 1, to open up your palate, but 2, to sort of show you what makes Overeem whiskey, I suppose. And hopefully you'll be able to pick up elements of this spirit profile throughout the whiskies that you sample this evening. So please pour up some of this new make spirit if you haven't already. Now, obviously, new make spirit, pardon me, is unmatured whiskey, and it really consists of 3 main ingredients, which in Overeem's case is malted barley, yeast, and Tasmanian water. I'm not sure if many of you have tried new make spirit before, but what we do here at Overeem is really what the distillery founder, Casey Overeem, Jane's father. We do everything the way that he initially created this new make spirit back in 2007 when he first started distillation and first founded Overeem Distillery. Jane will touch on a little bit about the history shortly, but he really set out with this quite specific and intentional endeavour to create this really clean, elegant and delicate sort of new make spirit that really represented whiskey that he liked drinking, and then 2, really represented the clean and fresh ingredients that we have here on offer in Tassie. So I think you'll notice if you move to the nose and you have a good nose of this, you're picking up lots of sort of fruits, stone fruits, lots of this sweetness. That's really from this long fermentation process that we undertake at Overeem. It's worth noting that everything we do at Overeem is this sort of long and slow process when it comes to single malt whiskey production, and that really stems from Casey's founding philosophy, which was he started this distillery as a hobby business. He wasn't financially motivated. He simply was trying to make a whiskey that would stand alongside his favorite whiskies of the world. So he set out to sort of achieve this goal, but he was in no rush in doing things. So he implemented these long ferments, these really slow distillations, these sort of longer style and sort of slower and more gentle maturation environments with our bond stores, which we'll probably touch on a little later. And he felt as though this spirit really sort of spoke to all of these processes that he was looking to implement. So on the palate, you'll notice that there's lots of malt there. So through the distillation process, the way we distill, it allowed this slow distillation. We retain a lot of this beautiful, creamy and oily Tasmanian malt. And it works really well with this sweetness through the yeast that we use and this long ferment that we undertake. So please have a taste. This is at 45%, I believe.
I think we brought it down from how it would traditionally come off the still. I imagine that's in the mid 70% ABVs.
Yeah, we wanted you to be able to actually taste it rather than just be sort of blown away by alcohol, I guess.
Yeah, so we mature it. So off the still, Emma, you're right. It's at around between 71 and 73%, depending on our cut points and yields, etc. There's a few variables there, and there's a few levers that we can control in order to dictate that. But we're maturing at 63.4%. All our casks, all our spirits matured at that ABV. So we dilute it down with filtered water and then put in barrel at that ABV.
Yeah, and Mark mentioned the long fermentation time. So we're actually fermenting for 7 days at Overeem, which is quite long. And that's because Dad just found that after 5 days, he's getting these beautiful fruity notes that he really wanted to get in those last couple of days, even though it's fully fermented out after about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
That extra couple of days just allows some really beautiful fruity notes to influence the spirit, which is to influence the brew, which in turn influences the low wines. So yeah, we hope you can sort of get those fruity green apple notes that we're really searching for in our new make spirit.
And so what I'd recommend, I'd recommend this, Emma touched on it before, throughout the tasting tonight, is try not to finish. I mean, if you've got one glass, you might be in a bit of, it might be a bit difficult, but we always recommend it. It's a great experience to be able to leave, whether it be the new make or whiskey 1, whiskey 2, and revisit these whiskies later, and then compare whiskey 4, whiskey 3, etc., and then even revisit the new make spirit, and just to see if you can pick up that spirit profile within the whiskies later on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's really kind of training your nose, and the opportunity to try new make spirits is so good. And I completely agree with what you're saying with that sweetness. I get those American grape lollies, that like purple flavor, very bizarre to describe, but yeah, so is everyone in the chat. It's super smooth, sweet and sugary. I think everyone's favorite comment so far is from Dan, saying that this is his favorite whiskey so far.
That's pretty cool.
I like it. I like
it.
Solid contribution.
We're off to a good start then. That's great.
Yeah.
Definitely green apple notes. Yeah, that's really good.
That's a great call, actually. I do want to touch on that. These sort of green apples, that's something we really strive for at Overeem, is to create this green apple profile, and that's something that Casey was always chasing in these early days. Just really wanted to get these green apples in, and we'll touch on the final whiskey of the night. Sort of, I think that resonates really well with our port cask matured whiskies. It just comes through, and it perfectly marries in that style cask maturation.
Yeah, it's really amazing with the brew. When you pump it into the still, you can actually smell what's going on with the brew, that you're almost so excited to do that distillation, because you know what it's going to produce in the low wines in that first distillation run. It's really quite awesome.
Yeah. And cutting it down to this sort of ABV too really exposes the spirit. So what I'd encourage you all to do is really explore the glass, top, bottom, sides, different sort of heights, and really try to pick up those intricacies of this spirit. And then once again on the palate too, sort of rinse your palate with this spirit in order to sort of try to pick up any imperfections, which I hope there is none, because the way we distill at Overeem is it's quite labour intensive. A lot of distilleries might just set and forget their stills, and especially through the stripping run or the low wines run or the wash run, whatever you want to refer to it as, a lot of people will just sort of let that do its thing and let the stills work their magic and let the copper do its thing. But what we tend to do is we're filtering this distillate off the stills and trying to remove any of these sort of bad or dirty oils from this distillate in order to ensure that this final new make spirit and heart spirit is as clean and is as elegant as we possibly can make it. So it's a lot more labour intensive, our distillations, than many distilleries.
Yeah, cool. I was going to say earlier, with that 7-day fermentation, you sure it wasn't Casey just wanting every second week off?
Yeah. Oh, look, it probably was when he started up. Like Mark said, it was a hobby and everything he did was slow, and it's like almost quite frustrating. You know, I worked with him for several years and I always was like, come on, Dad, let's do this and let's do that. And he's like, no, we just need to chill out and slow down and wait. You know, this is just all part of his philosophy, wasn't it?
Yeah, nothing we do at Overeem is really super efficient and super productive, and definitely not cost efficient. But we haven't changed anything through the processes over the 16 years that we've been operating, because we feel as though every part of this process is equally as important as each one. So like, we don't want to, we wouldn't jeopardize the quality of the spirit in order to, you know, obtain yield or make it more financially rewarding, etc. Yeah,
and that goes on to not just whiskey production, but post maturation as well, and maturation and post maturation as well. So we'll talk about that obviously soon enough about barrel maturation, but we could do things a lot quicker if we didn't have Dad's philosophy in place. But we're glad it's there, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's an awesome kind of. It's always good to see. It's, you know, that you're not rushing into anything, but at the same time you're like, man, so much more whiskey we could make.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, it wouldn't be to that same level, to that same, you know, flavor profile and whatnot.
And look, let's be honest, if we did change things, we wouldn't know for another 5 years, so it's pretty risky.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Well, shall we delve into the actual whiskey now?
Yes.
Stuff we actually spent time in a barrel, because I'm sure that I'm thrilled to see everyone absolutely loving the new make spirit. I have a soft spot for enjoying new make spirit straight off the still sometimes, but yeah, it's now we get to see the final product after all those years. So talk us through the recent addition to the core range.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So great point you make. This, the first whiskey that you'll be enjoying is our bourbon cask matured. So this is a single cask, single malt whiskey bottled at 43%. And it makes up one of the 6 whiskies in our core range. So our core range at Overeem consists of 6 whiskies, and that is a bourbon cask matured at 43%, and then one at 60%, which we call our cask strength. And then we do a port cask matured at 43 and 60, and also a sherry cask matured at 43 and 60. So you'll get 2 at 43 tonight and 1 at 60, all from our core range. And this core range really makes up the backbone of what we do at Overeem. So we really pride ourselves on our consistent single cask releases that we do. But we also do have a lot of fun with some limited release whiskies where we get the opportunity to marry barrels together and use some finishing casks. But our core range is really absolutely 80% of what we do and what we sell to Australia and a few export markets as well. And the reason we chose this one as our first whiskey is because it's typically quite light, as bourbon cask whiskies are. This one is my favourite of our core range at the moment, even over a 60%. I just love this bourbon cask matured. It's so light, it's so fruity, it's so easy to drink, and maybe that's what I enjoy at the moment. I know Mark's sort of like, really, I'm more of a port cask strength kind of
Horses for courses.
Yeah, but I'm
yeah.
really enjoying this one. So I hope it's not poor old whiskey number one that everybody forgets at the end of the night. I hope you remember this whiskey and enjoy this whiskey. And those of you who are familiar with bourbon casks, this one might be slightly different to what you've tasted before. And really, the reason for that is because of the treatment that we've given the cask. So this single cask is a 100-litre cask that's been cut down from a larger bourbon cask from the US, obviously. And we've actually toasted and charred it like we do our port and sherry casks as well. So what you'll notice with this whiskey is it's got the light, fruity, sort of typical vanilla bourbon notes that you'll normally get with a bourbon cask whiskey. But there's also some beautiful sort of toasted notes there too, like charred pineapple, we often say, and toasted marshmallow. It's just got those sort of deeper characteristics that you might not normally get on an original fill bourbon cask.
You can see it in the colour as well. It's slightly dark. I mean, you might see a lot of bourbon cask mature whiskies out there that are really quite light, pale and straw-like in colour, where this one's taken on a little bit more oak and I get a little bit of caramel and this caramelization on the palate as well. And I think that's definitely a result of the toasting treatment to these casks, all these residual sugars left in the wood that we've toasted out. And once that spirit sort of works in and out of that oak, it just really it caramelizes these sugars and it comes through on the palate. And it's got a fair bit of palate weight too as a result of that. And I think that it's quite viscous on the palate. It's delicious.
Yeah, we've got some wonderful tasting notes coming through. Pam says it's cupcakes on the nose, and I fully back that up. I get like funfetti cupcakes and sprinkles, like those little hits of sugar coming through. Leo, tropical fruit, toasted coconut, green and red apples. From Michael, honey and vanilla. Travis loves it. He loves how fruity it is. Rob, there is no caramel added to Australian whiskey.
No, so absolutely no colouring or flavours added to our whiskies. It's all coming from the cask. So you've literally gone from new make spirit to 5 years. This one's been matured 5 years and 1 month in this bourbon single cask. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, it's a fair thing to ask if there's any caramel syrup in it.
Yeah, of course.
It really does have that beautiful, like, rich caramel butterscotch kind of thing. Yeah. So Dan's got a great question on the story of Overeem, but I think we can probably talk about that with the Man of Promise.
Yeah, that's probably a good segue from Man of Promise. Absolutely. Yeah.
But Paul is wondering where you get your bourbon casks from.
Yeah, good question. So majority of our casks especially that are at market now are either ex-Heaven Hill or ex-Buffalo Trace casks. I just love that profile. And it's, once again, especially in particular the Heaven Hill barrels, that's what Casey originally sourced when he was laying down some of his smaller, so he only laid down quite a small number of casks back in the early days, of bourbon casks, I should say, in the early days. And they were specifically Heaven Hill because he had a really fond liking to these casks once when he sort of found the first, when he went out to the cooperage and sourced the first batch, he was like, these are amazing, I want to get more of these. So we really wanted to follow that suit, one, because we trust Casey's opinion, and but two, also because we want to create this consistency moving forward. Yeah.
And you guys haven't found, you haven't had any issues sourcing those casks? I know that a couple of distilleries, even in Scotland, have had to switch where they're getting their casks from. Because that's interesting.
Yeah, so Buffalo Trace are getting a little bit more difficult to source here in Tassie through our network of coopers and so forth. But like Heaven Hill, I can still source pretty readily. But we've found some other suppliers these days that are also we're getting some really good bourbon wood off them as well. So which is positive moving forward. Yeah.
Nice.
Rob said on the chat that extra month makes all the difference. You know what, Rob? It actually really does.
Yes.
And the reason I giggle at that was because we literally had a tasting at Overeem today, just the team tasting panel. And Richard and Claire, two of our distillers, laughed because Mark and I tasted this port cask whiskey and we're like, yeah, that's great. That's ready to go. What do you guys think? And they laughed and they said, a month ago it wasn't. And you guys said no.
Yeah.
And today we literally all signed off on it. So
Yeah.
it really, I don't know what it was. Well, obviously it's maturation, but a month ago, maybe it was our palates. I don't know. It wasn't ready, but today it was. So there you go. That's obviously happened with this whiskey as well.
Yeah.
5 years and 1 month.
That's crazy to see that like a month makes such a huge difference in that.
it really
Yeah,
can.
look, it
Like-
can, or it could be our palates. I don't know.
Yeah,
If it's
yeah.
ready on the day that we taste it, yeah, it may or may not be.
And it depends on the weather systems too. I don't want to get too nerdy and go too much into maturation,
pressure.
but like when you talk, we're pretty fortunate here in Tassie to get lots of high and low pressure systems swooping over the island regularly. And because of our bond store environments being quite temperate and we see very little temperature fluctuation, temperature doesn't play a huge part in our maturation process, not like in other distilleries around the state that might be maturing in sort of like colour bond warehouses in the middle of valleys where you know like you've got, and hive warehouses too, where you've got huge temperature fluctuations between the top casks and the bottom racks. We don't mature like that. We mature specifically in concrete and Bessa brick bond stores, where it's quite mild in winter and once again quite cool in summer. So
it's somewhere between 14 to 18 degrees all year round.
That's the only temperature fluctuation we see, and that comes down to Casey's original philosophy of and an experience he had at a Scottish distillery, where he was like, "This is the way I want to mature my whiskey in an environment like this." So we're really reliant on these high and low pressure systems coming through and influencing our maturation here in Tassie, which we're lucky to have.
Yeah. And
so the
with
bung
your-
always needs to be very tight, otherwise it doesn't mature.
Yeah, exactly. With your tasting panel, because obviously Rob's asking if the flavor changes depending on the weather on the day. Is that do you bring in all the team to help taste so that you get kind of a more rounded consensus, I suppose?
Yeah, so
It's definitely not us. No,
Yeah,
it's not Jane and I that sign off on it. Like, as in, we all have sort of equal representation around the panel. Definitely.
Yeah, it literally happens. We make sure we have a team meeting every Wednesday, and at the end of the team meeting, it's tasting time, which is pretty fun. So I think we all look forward to Wednesday afternoons.
Yeah. And
Everyone's-
the example Jane used before, I mean, Rich brought it back 1 month later because he had seen the change. And he was like, now I think this is ready for, because Richard Matthews, great operator. He's one of our key guys at Overeem. He's basically head of spirit. So he goes through and has the terribly hard job of checking all the casks on their progression, and brings X amount of samples to the tasting panel every week or every fortnight. So he thought this one had turned a corner, and we all did too. Today it was unanimous in the end.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. Well, Leo's got a great question, and I think we can talk about that as we taste whiskey number 3, the sherry cask. Now you guys have a really unique bond store. I've never seen anything like it. And obviously Leo has visited. Not. It's quite a sealed environment with lots of concrete and whatnot. Do you find that you get much air pressure fluctuation because of that? And how does this bond store in particular kind of affect your casks?
Well, I can't speak of pressure because, I mean, there is minimal fluctuation, I should say ventilation in our bond stores. And that's part of workplace health and safety and so forth. We need to allow a small part of ventilation in there. But we try to minimise that as much as we can so all the team can work at safe levels within these bond stores. So I can't speak to that, but there's no pressure build up, so to speak. But there's more fluctuation as outdoors. Yeah, I'm not sure with regards to how pressure would influence the maturation process. But when you walk into some of these into these bond stores, it's quite amazing experience. Anyone that's been down to the distillery would attest to it. You open the door and you just basically get engulfed by this
angel share.
basically by the angel share, like these wonderful aromas of spirit and wood, and like it's just delicious. And that, once again, that goes back to Casey, sort of this experience Casey had at Bowmore Distillery in Scotland. He was taken underground into some of their bond stores, and he encountered that same experience. And he just said, "I love the idea that these casks are breathing in what they're breathing out, and just really sitting there and sleeping, so to speak. They're not sort of like put under this high pressure of like of casks like really pushing in and out all the time. They're just being allowed to sleep in darkness and do their thing."
And look, there's absolutely no right or wrong way to mature your whiskey. I mean, a lot of people are doing it in corrugated iron sheds, and I mean, Bill Lark wandered through during Tas Whiskey Week, and he says, "Oh, you know, you've got to open the doors and let the whiskey come out, get the volatiles off," you know, and Dad says, "Nah, Bill, you've got to shut the doors and you've got to keep it all in." So, you know, you've got two, you know, industry pioneers who have founded these early distilleries, two doing things completely different, but yet, you know, there's no right or wrong. It's just a different way of doing it. And that's the beauty of what people are doing in Tassie. You know, there's a lot of, well, in Australia, there's a lot of distilleries, and we're all doing things differently, and which is great for the consumer, because you all get a chance to try something different from each distillery. I got distracted by Troy Fraser with the cool bond store picture behind us.
I love it, Troy.
I thought you were hidden in our bond store for a minute there.
Love it.
It's honestly, if you haven't been down to Overeem, you have to go. It has to be on the list. It's such a wonderful experience. Even Michael saying it was wonderful walking into the bond store, and it just feels like this little word we don't use anymore, grotto, you know, this like little dark cave, and it feels like a little bit mystical, and, you know, just got all these beautiful barrels and angel share. Do you find that you have kind of lower angel share losses because of that compared to some of the other guys nearby?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working at around 2.5 to 3% angel share per year, which is quite minimal compared to lots of conversations that I have throughout the industry.
Where they're 4 to 5, 5 to 6,
especially to those on the mainland that
are in warmer climates.
Yeah, warmer and climates with high humidity. They're experiencing up to sort of 13-14% angel share. So I mean, it's a significant difference. I don't think the variation's that big down here in Tassie with some of the other bond store environments, but I'd suspect that ours would be lower as a result.
Yeah, cool, amazing. Well, so chat us through. I'm curious as well, because you obviously, when Casey first started, the sherry cask and the port cask were really kind of, despite laying down bourbon, were really kind of his standouts. The sherry casks that you source, are they very similar to the early ones he was getting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you were about to say something. Yeah, so majority of the stock, especially that we're tasting now, is sourced from either McWilliams, Seppeltsfield, or Yalumba, I believe. I'd have to go back deep into the records to have a look exactly where this was from, but we really love that profile. It's like that. It's not super sweet sherry. It's that sort of Oloroso style, and we find just that spirit, our spirit, Overeem Spirit, works really well with these, with this style sherry and these fortified casks. And so it's probably a good time to, if people haven't already, move on to whiskey number 2.
So you can see straight away in your glass, there's more colour, and you're going to get those rich, beautiful fortified notes. And for me, a beautiful long finish in this particular sherry cask. But again, core range, we have a policy at Overeem where we really try not to, well, we don't decant anything until it's at least 5 years. So as Mark said earlier, Richard selects samples from casks that are 5 years plus. And really that's just because we've done it for many years now. where we know that they just do, for in our maturation environment, improve from 5 years onwards. So there's absolutely cracking casks at 4.5 years, but we've left them that little bit longer and they're even better. So we absolutely earmark these casks and taste them again at 5, and they are just more rounded. We really don't want that sort of young spirituous sort of heat in any of our whiskies. So we really try hard not to do that. So I hope you find in these whiskies here that they are very approachable at 43%. That's what we are looking for in our 43% distiller strength whiskies.
Yeah, I think Oliver made a really good call on the bourbon cask, and it's probably worth touching on. I was going to mention, actually, you use the word balanced, which is something that it comes up in our tasting panel every week. It's something that's big on what we look for in a whiskey, is trying to find this balance in a whiskey that we deem ready. And Jane touched on the 5-year maturation, and this is really the first period of the spirit's maturation where we start to see this balance in the whiskey, where it's because we could look at whiskies at 3-4 years old and they've got all this lovely sweetness and all this and all these lovely flavors to them, but they lack a bit of complexity. They might be a bit youthful. They've got a bit too much. They're a bit too spirituous and a bit too new make spirit forward, and they haven't drawn out enough oak yet. They've got a lot of the previous contents of the cask sort of showcasing too much on the palate. Whereas when we get to this 5 to 6 year period in with our spirit in 100-litre casks in our bond stores, we find that we just start to see this balance where we get this lovely bit of oak influence, we get the previous contents, we get our spirit profile coming through, and we just find this lovely harmony between spirit and wood.
Cask,
And that was something that Jane and I didn't discover. This was something that Casey discovered back in the early days with his spirit, and he thought this 5 to 6 year sort of maturation period in this size cask is what I want to achieve.
Yeah, he always said he doesn't want his whiskey to taste like sherry. He doesn't want to drink a sherry, and he doesn't want to drink a port. He wants to drink a whiskey that's got an influence of sherry or an influence of port. And as Mark said, we've just sort of found that balance, that beautiful balance between spirit and cask. Well, we hope we have anyway. So
yeah, it's definitely not your typical kind of sherry bomb, and I'm fully behind. Like, if you want a moment where you want to drink like sherry, boozy sherry, just drink sherry. You know? And it really has a hint. There's some wonderful notes. I agree with Rob. The finish goes on and on. I get, that when you smell a punnet of raspberries that are not quite overripe and they're still like a little bit tangy and zesty, and you just get that that note finishing through. Michael's still getting that light green apple note on it, and Cam reckons he's craving sweets. Fully agree with the Allen's strawberry cream lollies. That is and red frogs as well. There's like a little hint of those red frog lollies. But yeah, molten honey. David says superb, a hint of sherry without getting close. You're getting toffee apple. I agree, but only the toffee apples where it's like that dyed red toffee on the outside. And you're like, should I be eating this? Sure. But
there's definitely a place for a big sherry bomb. I love a big sherry bomb, but
our sherry 60s, our cask strength whiskies really sort of cater for that sort of that the people wanting that experience, and we'll get a bit of a
taste of that
an influence. Yeah, exactly. With the Port 60 at the end of the tasting, but these, especially these core range with these at 43% distiller strength is what we call them. These are drinking whiskies. That's what they're designed to be. They're designed to be enjoyed with friends, with family, and they're designed to be drunk. And we want the drinking experience to be super fun and pleasurable and enjoyable. So
amazing. Well, I think we should move on to the whiskey that I'm really excited to try, because they poured it all for themselves up in Sydney, and I don't get to try it until it's with you guys, which I actually kind of like, because then we can chat more about it, and please throw in more tasting notes in the chat. I love them. But the whiskey we are all here for, the Floc Shots Batch number 4.
Yes.
It's a decent pour.
I poured Mark about 10 mil and me about 40, I think.
I got about that much.
That wasn't very fair, was it?
Anyway.
There you go.
No, it's fine. I don't know. It's fine. Yeah, whiskey.
Awesome. So obviously, give us a bit of a background. I know Jane and I talked about it in the interview that we did that's up on our website, but yeah, give us a little brief through Floc Shots. My sampler is not very cloudy, but maybe some.
No, it's really hard to see in the glass, isn't it? I mean, even when I sort of pick up 2 glasses, I mean, hopefully you guys can see that it's definitely a cloudier whiskey than the previous whiskies that you've just enjoyed. But look, Floc Shots is a bit of a tribute to my father, Casey Overeem. The whole name Floc Shots, it's an interesting one if you hadn't have heard it before. A shot of flock. I mean, it's pretty out there. But yeah, so back in the day when Dad he started Overeem Distillery as a hobby business, and he was producing about a barrel a week, sort of at the time when he first started. So it wasn't a lot. So when he was bottling whiskey and we were out there selling it, there was a certain amount of whiskey left over, I guess you could say, after decanting a barrel and breaking it down to a lower ABV. A natural chemical reaction occurs where floc will form. So floc is just like little particles that float around in the solution when you add water to whiskey. I'm sure you've all seen me present this on Facebook or Instagram during the last few weeks. But that's basically what happens. Now, all these beautiful floaties that that are floating around in the solution are completely natural, and they actually hold all these beautiful natural fats and oils that Dad and a lot of other people want to retain in their whiskey. And if you want to, the only thing that these little particles do is make your whiskey appear cloudy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them other than that they make your whiskey appear cloudy. So you can't really go and bottle it and put it on the shelf in this way. Otherwise, people would wonder what's going on. So you can chill filter these little particles out, but you are stripping a lot of the natural fats and oil out of your beautiful single malt whiskey. So what we do and what others do is it's called a settling process that we undertake. So Mark spoke about earlier, sorry, child with no shirt on in the background. We spoke about earlier that Dad did everything really slow and measured and inefficient and not cost effective.
Yes.
And one of the things he did was settle our whiskey. So when you add the water to our whiskey and we break it down to 43%, we have to settle out our whiskey for at least 6 to 8 weeks in order for this floc to form. And eventually the floc will fall out of solution and settle on the bottom of a vessel. Now, all this floc becomes, really cloudy, like what you've got in the Floc Shots. And all we're doing is drawing off the clear whiskey from the top and putting that into bottle. Now, what's left is this beautiful, fatty, oily whiskey. And it's honestly, we say, the best part of the barrel that no one really gets to see, because what Dad used to do when he was only making a small amount of whiskey is he used to take it home and put it in his decanters, and when his mates came round he said, "Oh, do you want a Floc Shot?" That's what he used to say to everybody. So that's where that name Floc Shot came about, and everyone used to come to Dad's on a Friday, Saturday night for some Floc Shots. And it was really interesting because when we had Ollie and Chris and that at the distillery, when Mark and I had taken over the business and we were producing a lot more whiskey, they sort of said, "What are you going to do with all of this floc?" And we said, "Yeah, we don't know, like it's such a waste because you've got all this beautiful whiskey here. Maybe we'll just, give it to our friends and bottle it and whatever." And the guys said, "You should market this. You should put this in bottle and sell it to consumers and actually educate people about what floc is." And we thought it was such a risky thing to do, but we thought, well, maybe we'll just do 100 bottles in and see how it goes. And if it's a terrible failure, then maybe only 100 people have heard about it, maybe 200. So we did it, and it was such a hit, and people loved it. They loved this education around what floc is. It was such a creamy, buttery whiskey. Sorry, we've got children coming in. Anyway, so it took off in year one, and now we love that we've got this to offer to people each year. So basically what the Floc Shots is in your glass is a marriage of all of the settled floc from the cask that we've decanted over the year. Because we do this as a yearly thing, this Floc Shots is a marriage of port, sherry, bourbon, muscat, some limited releases that we've released throughout the year. And it's actually not, like if you come to the distillery and actually see the floc that's formed in the bottom, it's not all of that floc. It's a mix of partial bits of the floc, because if you really let it settle down right to the bottom, it's very dark. So this in itself is a whiskey that has been put together by our team to really make a beautiful balance of floc. So there's just enough floc in the bottle to form on the bottom of your bottle. When you shake it up, it's cloudy. We don't want to give you like full on deep dark floc. It's not too much. But if you do come to the distillery one day, you can absolutely try that if you want to. But yeah, this is as much floc as you probably want to get, I think.
Yeah. You'll probably notice this one's a little different to the last couple that we've released. It's a bit more bourbon driven and a bit more sweeter.
Yeah.
And what the process that we've used now over the last couple of years is we've sort of got this mother, I suppose you would call it, of floc, which is about 30 or 40 litres, maybe even more actually, about 50 litres of floc, which is a mixture of all of our floc over the last 3.5 or 3 to 3.5 years, which consists of everything from bourbon.
I just went through that.
Oh, you
sorry.
did? Yes, sorry, I missed all that. Yeah. So this one's slightly different. It's a bit more sort of fruity and sweet, this whiskey, rather than the last that have been a little bit more sort of port and fortified driven. But I'm a huge fan of this.
So one of the Jose, you said the Solera system flocs. No, so there's no floc from Solera because the Solera is at natural cask strength. So we only get floc from the whiskies that have been brought down lower than about 46, 47%. But there is a bit of Tokay in there. Someone said a bit of Tokay.
Yeah, I think Leo picked up the muscat and Tokay.
Yep.
Tokay, definitely.
And I think it's that never-ending, because Owen and Lindsay were saying that they remember the white bucket well. It's a never-ending white bucket of floc. I think that's what Rob and Jose were questioning about. But yeah, everyone is thrilled by it. And I remember, I think the last batch we had a bottle, and for some reason, all of the floc particles in it just were absolutely attracted to each other, and there was just this big, totally bizarre looking floaty in the middle of the bottle. And the customer was like, look, I understand, but like maybe this is a bit too much. So, we don't go full crazy with the floc fat.
But look, it's a really good point you make. If some of the floc binds together and forms like a bit more of a larger particle, don't worry, just shake it and it will fall away, separate. But yeah, I mean, that's why you got to be a little bit careful that you don't put too much floc in. Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight, when you're traveling around the world, you go to travel retail duty free, and you see this giant wall of whiskey, and the person doesn't know much about the whiskey, they're just selling it. Imagine every distillery around the world didn't do the chill filtering. Most of these bottles would be cloudy. They would look weird, and you'd pick it up, and if you're a consumer looking at it for the first time, you'd be like, I'm not going to spend a few $100s on this product. And this is why the global industry does the chill filtering. They go through these different process. So it's not removing bad stuff out of the product. It's just, visually, it looks, especially in cold climates, when it does clump together. So you go to Europe during the winter and you see these bottle shops, and it would be a catastrophe. It would be like, what is wrong with a whiskey? Every single one's doing it. So this is why the industry just does it. But it's definitely not a bad thing. Like you said, it's the best part of the barrel.
So if you want to see the floc in your bottle form quite quickly, you can put it in the fridge. So if you put your bottle of Floc Shots in the fridge, it'll settle out on the bottom quite quickly.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely delicious. I'm getting so much Nutella on the nose as well. This is so chocolatey. I am curious, like Travis, to see a full bourbon cask floc. That would be awesome.
It'd be so fruity and so
I must pay credit here too to Richard. Once again, Richard Matthews, he's basically put this whiskey together this year's Floc Shot. So I'm really impressed with it. So it's credit to him.
Yeah, like I said before, it's not literally just all the flock put together and put it in a bottle. It's actually been worked together properly between the different casks and married together to produce a balanced whiskey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone said, what's the ABV of the flock? It is 43. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I do have to say, I thought it was Leo. It was Andrew who picked up the muscat and Tokay. Sorry, Leo. I know you've got a great palate as well. But I love what Andrew said here, where it takes you on a trip of the year that was, because it takes you guys quite a while to collect all that flock. So it is like a drinking through time, I suppose.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep. There's bourbon 12-year-old in here.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask, for those who've been on the Floc Shots journey with us over the years, how's this year's flock compared to batches 1, 2, and 3? Just throw it into the comments. Curious to see.
Yeah.
And each one's slightly different.
Yeah, you absolutely don't need to tell us it's your favorite. You're not going to offend us. We've all got our favorite things along the way.
Yeah. Michael reckons it's number 1. I think I was particularly drawn to batch 2.
Yeah.
Okay,
Someone else said I think 2 was my favorite. Yeah. So I can't really remember them. We need to line them up. Have you guys kept enough back so we can do 4 flock shots in a row? That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if we get to do it again next year, I think the virtual tasting will be maybe 5 flocks.
5 flocks.
That would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we'll run with all of the puns. We give 5 whole flocks. About this whiskey. That'll be great.
Yeah, so a few people have said they would like flockier. Okay, so that's always a concern of ours, because we don't want it to be, we don't want people to say, oh, it's too much flock. So, I mean, if people want flockier, we can give flockier, that's fine. But it's always a fine line. We're like, do we do it or not?
Well, I'll tell a quick honest story about last year's batch. What was batch 3? That was. I said, we actually bottled whatever it was, 300 odd bottles, 350, 400 bottles, and we
redid it.
We looked at it about a week later, and we were like, we cannot sell this.
It's too much. It was too thick.
It was too thick. It was just too flocky. And we're like, we need to tip this out. We need to put it back into the vessel, draw back off again, and then just reintroduce some flock and start again. So it is a bit of a balancing act for us in order to make it. It still needs to be visually appealing. It needs to be palatable. It needs to have great flavour. It needs to be enjoyable. So there's lots of things we're trying to tick off with the Floc Shot release. Yeah,
and we'd have to actually bottle it a lot earlier than to when we actually send it to you guys and you guys send it out, because it takes a while for these little particles to actually bind together. So I think our biggest fear is that it gets to all the consumers and it's bound together really thick. And we don't know if that's going to happen in like a couple of months. So it's always one of those risky sort of releases that we're playing around with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Travis is keen to spread it on toast. What would be cool if you did the bottling of the lower, the more neutral amount of flock, like this one. And then if you just did like a small jar of the absolute.
Yeah, okay. That's a really cool idea.
I think
we can do that.
Okay, batch number 5. You're getting a bottle and a full-on flock sample, and you can add as much flock as you want.
I like it.
It's happening, okay? Yeah.
Yes, that's
we
good.
say it to you now.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, look at the thumbs up. Everyone's like, good. I reckon that
gives the approval as well.
And then you can make it as flocky as you want. Absolutely. You've got genuine flock shots, like in Dad's decanters. You can do absolutely.
I'll start pre-orders tonight.
That's a cool idea.
Designed by democracy. I love it. That's great. This is cool.
Yeah, and it really shows like the whole process of like, okay, this is a quite flocked whiskey, and this is everything.
Real flock. Put it in your bottle if you want. It's up to you what you do with it after you get it. Yep. Yeah,
amazing. Well, I think we should probably delve into whiskey number 5, the Man of Promise, and I think this is the great opportunity to talk more about Casey and how Casey founded the distillery and how you got involved, Jane, as well.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll try not to take too long. I'm mindful of everyone's evenings. They don't want to just listen to Mark and I all night. But this whiskey is really super special to us. And again, like Floc Shots, a tribute to my dad. And he is the man with the promise. He's the one that made this promise to himself. So Mark did touch on it earlier. Dad sort of flippantly maybe made this promise to himself when he was on a trip with my mum in Norway on their honeymoon, and he had his first experience with a really small still that my mum, who's Norwegian, was experimenting with under his house in his basement. My uncle, Odd, his name is, he had a very small still under his house. This was back in the 80s, by the way, for anyone that I didn't say. And Dad was fascinated by this still. He just thought this was so cool because Odd had this beautiful, clear, clean, beautiful whiskey that he just couldn't, or this beautiful spirit that was coming off this still that Dad was so fascinated with, that after trying it and seeing what he was doing with this still, Dad sort of said to Mum on the way home, he goes, oh, I'd love to do this one day. Like one day I'm going to have a still and I'm going to make spirit. And even better, I'd love to make whiskey because that's what Dad loved. And then it wasn't until he sort of got back home to Tassie, he got a small still from a garage sale and was tinkering around with it under the house at our family home in Blackmans Bay. And he really started to become passionate about this. And he made a promise to himself that one day he would love to make a whiskey that would stand alongside the best whiskies in the world. So because he loved and had such a wonderful collection of Scottish whiskies, he thought, imagine if I could make one that would be up on the shelf in amongst those. And it was such a real sort of promise and dream and vision, I guess, that he had. And what I guess we love so much about Overeem is that he fulfilled that promise. You know, he didn't rush into it. He took years to actually start the distillery from when he made that promise to himself in the 80s. He didn't start a distillery until he was retired when he was 50, and he started as a hobby, but he never did anything by halves. And he got these two beautiful big copper pot stills handmade in Tasmania and set them up in a little shed in the front yard of our family home in 2007 and started making whiskey. And we didn't release any whiskies until they were 5 years old, and they were 100-litre casks that Dad had laid down. And it was about 4.5 years that he sort of tasted. Well, he obviously tasted them every year or probably every 6 months until he deemed them ready. But it was about 4.5 years in that size cask that he said, oh, I think this is really starting to get to where I would like it to be. And he actually sent off a little sample after 4.5 years to Jim Murray, who I know is not the most well-liked bloke around these days, but back then he was quite popular. And Dad thought, you know, there's this whiskey Bible out there and I'll send off this sample. And he sent it, and the team at Jim Murray wrote back just saying, this whiskey is awesome. It's ready. So sort of from 4.5 years to 5 years is when Dad went, all right, I'm going to start sort of thinking about bottling this whiskey and getting it out there. Yeah, and I got involved in the early years when I was living at home and doing a business degree at uni, and I started doing a few days distilling with Dad. And then in 2012, I got involved in selling Overeem Whisky and launching the brand into Australia. And then, long story short, but in 2014, Dad actually sold the distillery, and Lark Distillery and Overeem merged. And Lark and Overeem were together for a number of years, 6 years actually. Mm-hmm. And then in 2020, Mark and I bought the Overeem brand back and many barrels, and rolled the Overeem barrels back into our original bond stores, which was pretty exciting. But yeah, so that's a very long history of 15 years in about 5 minutes. But that's probably all you really need to know if you're hearing the Overeem story for the first time, or if you've heard it 10 times. But yeah, so a family distillery was sold for 6 years, but now we're really happy to have it back in family hands. And Dad's very happy because he's still around, by the way. He's not passed away. A lot of people say to me, you talk about your father like he's passed away. No, he's still very much around, and he's away motorhoming at the moment. And Mark and I are doing all the hard work.
Yeah. But we made, it's worth noting, like, we made the decision back when we bought the distillery, or bought the distillery back, bought the brand back, that we everything that we were going to do moving forward was we were almost custodians of this brand, and we really wanted to pay homage to Casey. That's what, this Overeem brand was quite well established, even though not a lot had been done with it for a 3 or 4 or 5 year period. And Casey's I view Casey as being a bit of a treasure of the Australian whiskey industry, and I think his story is probably one that should be celebrated. So I think that we said to ourselves, one, we don't want to change a single thing to the production process for Overeem. We want to continue doing things exactly the way Casey first established them. And Jane, wouldn't it be nice if we could invite Casey back into the distillery once a year to select some of his favourite casks out of the bond stores and put together a whiskey that he could release at the end of every year. And so this is Man of Promise number
3. We got
yeah.
Overeem back in 2020, and like Mark said, that first year we said to Dad, before Christmas, can you go down into the bond store and select your favourite cask? And that was year 1. We said, just go and select your favourite cask, let's bottle it, and let's just tell people about your promise. And that's where we sort of came up with Man of Promise. And Dad signs the bottles and writes a little note on each one. And it really is just a celebration of the year that was, and him doing what he loves, and that's going and fossicking through barrels and selecting his favourite, and sort of branching out from the core range and choosing his own ABV and bottling it at that. And then year 2, I think he married 2 port casks together. So year 1 was 1 port cask. And then year 2, he actually had 3 port casks. So he genuinely does select these barrels. So we send him down to the shack. He goes down to the shack and he lights the fire, and he's got a row of little 50ml bottles, and he sits there and tastes them all, and he chooses his favorite, and then he starts marrying them together and figures out what he loves blended together, and then chooses the ABV. And so this particular year, I love it, again, because I said how much I loved the bourbon at the moment. And this one's actually bourbon cask heavy, which is interesting for Dad because he's normally a port lover.
So this is Man of Promise 4, Joan.
Is it number 4
Yeah,
already?
number 4. So
we took over in 2019.
Yeah.
19, 20, 21.
No, 2021,
22, 23. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is predominantly bourbon and sherry heavy. And there might be just a little element of port in there as well that he really just wanted to dash in there. But like it is sherry and bourbon. And I'm really loving how this is drinking at the moment. But this isn't bottled yet, so this is out of cask. It's married. It's just doing its thing. It's settling out, and we're really excited to release this in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes, so this comes out just before Christmas, but it's not really a Christmas release anymore. We're going to start to sort of, we've changed Man of Promise around this year. So I'm not sure if you've seen our previous years. It's quite a Christmassy style label. Originally, it was quite a Christmassy release, but now because it's done so well and people love the cask that Dad selects, we thought let's make them a bit bigger each time. And it's almost like a reserve that we have each year now. So this is the Man of Promise reserve number 4, and it will probably last about 6 to 7 months. And then it's sort of gone for a few months, and then we release them again.
It's almost like a vintage. Up in ABV too, right?
Yeah, and I think this one's 46, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tastes Christmassy. That's good. Yeah, even though it's not necessarily a Christmas release, it does always have these beautiful Christmas notes. And I think that's because Dad loves the Christmas notes in casks. That's what he's sort of partial to choosing.
Yeah, it's such like a great way to see how Casey how Casey kind of sees the brand and all that. I love people's comments. Leo, sublime as usual. The 2020 was his favorite. Andrew agrees. Ollie just finished his last Man of Promise a few years back, so I'm sure he'll be locking in a bottle of this. Travis says apple biscuits and ginger. I'm getting those funny little French biscuits that have the petite ecoliers or whatever they are, with like the little snip of dark chocolate. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I completely agree with the Christmassy vibe. Are you guys ever worried that he'll nick a barrel you have grand plans for?
Yeah, he does do that.
Yeah. We've like Jane said, we've started sending him to the shack with like samples rather than
Him getting to
give
go
him the
into the bond
keys to the
store.
bond store, like because he gets a bit excited down there. So but no, Casey's great. He's an absolute asset, and we're so grateful that he still wants to be part of what we're doing. And he's just full of mentorship and full of like not just to Jane and I, but to the entire team. He always comes in, and some of the more less experienced staff, he'll spend time with them just on his day off when he comes in just to visit. And he's so generous with his time, and yeah, it's great.
And he loves quite traditional distilling techniques and producing port sherry bourbon. And I remember when we said, oh, we'd love to sort of marry some casks and do some cool cask finishes, and I'll never forget when Mark said, oh, I've just put a couple of Spotty Dog stout casks down. Dad was like, what's he doing? Like, why would he do stout casks? And I remember him thinking that was just so strange. And then when we released it, he was like, actually, that's good whiskey. He loved it. So I think he loves that we sort of take the risk a little bit, but 80% of what we do is definitely true to his philosophy, and the core range is really prominent. But he has certainly appreciated the limited releases that we've done.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Dan's wondering how you can buy this. Obviously, this is not released yet, but it'll be available on the website at some point.
Yep, and wholesale will sell it to the bottle shops and bars and restaurants as well. Yeah,
you'll probably get a couple for the whiskey list as well.
Yeah, they'll be out there, and we'll probably release early November.
Early November is when we're targeting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get like 4 bottles for Ollie and 2 for customers, but yeah, and I will say as well, it is going to be obviously a Christmas-y-ish adjacent release, even if it's not obviously intended.
Yeah, it's still Christmassy to us, absolutely. But it just hangs around a bit longer now, which is good.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, there's definitely some great Christmas options from Overeem. I'm trying to compile a Christmas gifts guide, and top of my list to put on there was the glass and bottle combo that you guys have. It's beautiful.
The comments actually talking about the Crystal Glen cans right now, but I just wanted to pay a special a shout out to Matt and Co, couples who Overeem together, stay together. I can see Mike's wearing his Overeem shirt. I managed to.
So good. Oh, and these guys match. We've got that beautiful photo of you on our Instagram. You guys are like models.
So get yourself an Overeem shirt for Christmas as well. I know you did the promo for Father's Day, so yeah, distillery merch is a lot of good fun.
Yeah, we love our shirts actually. And guys, if you're keen to do a 21k half marathon up the mountain in November, please come down and do it with us. We're going to push a barrel of whiskey up the mountain. Look at all the naysayers.
Oh, suddenly not so keen.
It's for a good cause. We're telling you, we're raising money for charity.
There will be a whiskey party at the distillery.
I'm sure there'll be some whiskey on pour, either at the top of Mount Wellington or back at the distillery later on. So you won't go thirsty that night, that's for sure.
Yeah, looks like Tom's in as long as there's whiskey after. Well, I think we should probably sadly move on to our last whiskey of the evening, the Port cask strength. What made you guys kind of, especially when talking about this, and you can tell us about the way that you craft this, but what really made you decide to do the 43% and the 60%? Is that because obviously it's very distinct?
Yes.
Well, it's pretty traditional, I think. And this was a Casey thing when he first started the distillery. It's quite a traditional sort of method to do a cask strength whiskey, and then also do a whiskey down at 43%, more of a drinking style whiskey. So I mean, we could look at, occasionally we release whiskey at natural cask strength with special releases like Jane was talking about before, but The way we sort of source our cask strength whiskies is some whiskies will present fantastically at 43%, but just might be a little bit volatile, a little bit sharp at cask strength. And then, but the same thing happens conversely too. So like a whiskey might present great at cask strength, but then we dilute it down to 43 and it just doesn't meet the standards. So we come across that odd cask, which might be 1 in 6 or 1 in 10, that really just sort of like you just don't really want to touch it. And I wouldn't say that our cask strength offerings are the best of the best, but they are whiskies that just we don't believe need any dilution at all. The port cask strength in particular is probably our most highly regarded dram.
It's probably been the most awards. Highly awarded whiskey. Yeah, and like Mark said, it's the whiskey that when we taste on the tasting panel, it's just a shame to add water to it, It really is. And look, it might not be 100% perfect, but that's also okay, because we know that the people who buy our cask strength whiskies, they do what they want to do, and they add a couple of drops of water, or they might go, oh, this one is a little bit too much for me, and I'm going to add a bit of water with it, or I'm going to add a bit of ice, or however they want to drink it, and that's what we sort of want. So we don't look for absolute perfection, but we look for whiskies that are good, big whiskies. Please remember that when you taste our cask strength whiskies, they are all very consistent across our single casks, but you absolutely get differences between each cask, and that's the beauty of single cask. You put one port cask strength up against another one, and you'll absolutely taste the differences, and that's the cool thing. Some of them are more balanced. Some of them have a longer finish. Some of them you'll want to add a couple of drops of water. Others you won't, and that's the fun thing about buying a cask strength whiskey, I think. I hope you really like this one. There should be a lot of chocolates, caramels, fruits, spices, all of those beautiful Christmas notes that we look for in a port cask strength whiskey.
I think the main difference between these cask strength whiskies is just that level of complexity. Right? Like, as in, it just offers that little bit more. Like, you might get a little bit more volatility and a little bit more heat. But it is just that complexity and those layers of flavors and that ability to be able to really explore it both on the nose and on the palate. These whiskies, they might carry a higher price point, but obviously I think you can sit on them for a lot longer and really just sit there and enjoy them. I quite often say, if Jane and I are going to switch on a movie or something for the night,
and you only want one whiskey, it's got to be a cask strength.
It's got to be a cask strength. I'll sit down and pour myself a nice healthy pour and then just sit on it and sip little tiny sips for the night, and it's just delicious.
I noticed Mike Kidd with a block of chocolate there. That's absolutely the best.
Oh, so good.
A piece of chocolate and a cask strength. There you go. You're in heaven.
Good old Cadbury and Overeem pairing. I love it.
You're not watching a nice movie. You're watching Mark and Jane, which is probably pretty boring.
Well, I love the tasting notes, guys. Liam came out with a great note. I was wondering, is that bubblegum? It's got that Hubba Bubba pink bubblegum sweetness to it. It's like a little bit of banoffee pie on the nose. It's beautiful. Mike with the Tina Turner reference, it's simply the best. Finish is still going. Leo finds that Tasmanian distillates take really well to port finishes, and I agree. This honestly, the cask strength versions are my favorites, just because I like a little bit more viscosity and a little bit more ABV. But it's absolutely beautiful. Christmas pudding with a bit of holly on top, says Michael. Super, super chewy. Now, before we leave tonight, I'm going to run the poll so that you guys can see. Oh, well, we can see, Mark and Jane. Don't spoil it.
No, we won't. But I love to see this. Thanks for doing that, because I always want to know, because if you do have some left in your glass, revisit. Poor old whiskey number one, Jane's favourite.
I wasn't going to say it. Don't forget about whiskey number one.
Yeah, poor old bourbon 43. But love to see what you guys think.
Yeah, as hosts of these Zooms, obviously we can see how you guys are voting. It's like the most exciting horse race ever. It's so good to see which of these whiskeys will
We
come
should
out
probably
on
take a
top.
photo. No,
But
no, it's so exciting for us. Yep.
I'll
Yeah.
screenshot this and send it to you guys afterwards, Jane and
Yeah.
Mark.
But
I
if
threw
everyone
in-
can participate, that would be awesome.
I threw in a bonus question. We normally just ask the top question regularly, but because Overeem does these 3 amazing casks as the core range, so the bonus question is: do you prefer bourbon, sherry, or port cask flavors?
Oh,
Yes,
I'd
I
love
know
to
there's
that. Yes, that would be
Just-
so great to know.
So yeah, please give us your opinions. Obviously, we tried the cask strength port, so that's gonna, I think the higher ABV might be influencing people's votes. But yeah, just add a bit of water to it if you got some, and just compare the bourbon, the sherry, and the port.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you need more in your glass, just pop down to Overeem Distillery and we'll top you right up.
Yeah.
And if there was
do have a
any
great-
questions, sorry.
Yeah, I've
I
got a
was going
great
to
question.
say, yeah, if there may have been, I saw some great questions pop up on the screen
Yeah,
earlier
it's
on in the
tiny
table,
Mm.
but obviously just I didn't get an opportunity to
read them all.
answer and read them all. So if anyone's got a burning question that they feel as they didn't get answered, feel free to fire it again and happy to answer.
Yeah, 100%. Cam does have a question, which I'm curious about as well. I know you did the port and sherry marriage for us last year, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
I think, I don't know, time flies.
It was last
it was,
year.
I think
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, is that something you're going to be doing again potentially? Is that going to come back?
Well, that's up to you, Emma.
Well, that
Would you
was
like to do
that was a
it?
whiskey list. That was a whiskey list exclusive,
Exclusive,
wasn't
yeah.
it? So, but I really liked that. I mean, I thought that was pretty jammy and like real.
Well, that was natural cask strength, so that was really big. That was a really big, yummy whiskey. So yeah, we can, because like we said earlier, we don't really experiment too much with the core range. It's up to like the whiskey list and other groups that we partner with, and if we wanted to do any limited releases, to really sort of push the boundaries a little bit and go for a natural cask strength. If we want to, we can definitely source those casks and work on it as a team with those releases.
It's a great point, actually, Emma. I'm glad you raised this because we always want to be known for something specific, which is we want to be known as this single cask, single malt distillery that and want to be known for our core range. I think Ollie put up a comment before about the consistency of what we do, and that's something that we hold to the highest priority. Is we just want to release consistently great
Good
whiskey
casks
that people can rely upon. Doesn't matter if you buy it this year, last year, in 5 years' time. It's going to be a similar, if not the same, drinking experience as best as you can achieve with single cask releases. So we tend not to do too many limited releases, and we don't want to be doing. I mean, we've got the stock to release different whiskies, and we've got the creative ability and the staff that want to do these sort of creative releases, but we also don't want to confuse our customers as to what it is that we stand for.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think that kind of goes into Alex and Mateus were curious about the PX and the Tokay releases as well, if those are going to be potentially another limited release in the future. Or
look, I mean, I loved the Tokay. The Tokay was one of my favorite whiskies for the last couple of years, and so I was like, oh, I'm so tempted to now bring that into even our core range. I absolutely loved it. And you know, I think a lot of people do really love our cask strength whiskies, and I think if we can sort of nail different releases at cask strength, I think that would be very appealing to our customers for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Dan's curious, are you going to collab with any other distilleries potentially in the future? We've seen a lot of Aussie distilleries collaborating on like maybe a second fill cask or doing a blend or something like that. Is that ever something you consider?
So you probably heard about the one that we did with Todd Morrison. We did the No Boundaries release with Spring Bay. And that was really fun. And that's really because we wanted to honor a really great relationship that we've had with Todd from Destination Cellars for many, many years. He's been supporting Overeem since the very beginning, 2012. And he was really keen to to blend 2 different distilleries together. So, we'd definitely be keen to do that. We just, our really good friends from Warbs Harbour up in Bicheno in Tasmania, they We just did a bit of a marriage between our port and their bourbon, wasn't it?
Recently.
For fun, for a tasting we did up at Sapphire, which was a boutique accommodation experience up in Bicheno in Tasmania. And that went really well. And we thought, oh, we could bottle this, you know. Maybe there's Warbs and Overeem release on the horizon.
Yeah, who knows? Who
I
knows?
I think one of the guys in the chat, Andrew, was already keen on a Warbs collab. So
cool. So I think that would probably be one of the preferreds. Oh yeah, there you go. We collab Warbs, please. Yeah, great. Well, they happen to be our very good friends. So there you go.
Yeah. But our biggest problem at the moment, Emma, is stock. Actually, it's probably worth noting that we're pretty much sold out of all of our core range. Oh no, we've got our cask strength. We've got two SKUs in our cask strength that are available, but everything else is pretty much sold out, which is a bad time of the year to be sold out. So
right before Christmas.
We're not in a great position, really, because but at the same time, you could argue it's a good position to be in. But so once stock levels increase, which we worked hard 4, 5, 6 years ago in order to achieve that, we'll be in a better position to be able to look at projects like that for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Just a quick little last one, because Travis brings up a really great one, because there was the obviously not one that you guys bottled, but for the 10th anniversary there was a red wine cask Overeem bottled.
Yes.
Are you thinking maybe red wine cask for the 20-year anniversary?
So I'll give you some inside information on that one, because that one was a really, really, really difficult release. It was so dry, and we left it and we left it and we left it. And then finally it came right. And you know what? I'm going to give you a little inside scoop. We added a little bit of bourbon. So
finished.
No, that's right. We finished it in a bit of bourbon because it was so dry, and we sweetened it up at the very end. And a lot of people have that one sitting on their shelves as a first and only release with a certificate of authenticity. And probably don't realize that we actually finished it in bourbon. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I think I am, because
it was many years ago.
And we've got Overeem brand back now, and Mark aren't going to get me in trouble for that. But anyway, so that's it. It's got a little bit of bourbon, but to be honest, I wouldn't do another red wine cask again, because with our spirit, it was really tricky to manage. It was super dry.
Yep. It wasn't
a big fan. No, so, it didn't fit the Overeem core range, but once we finished it in bourbon, it was actually quite lovely. So yes, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, amazing.
Shall we share the results?
I think we shall. So we will share the results, and it's honestly nearly neck and neck, the Man of Promise and the Overeem Port cask, which is
right.
I mean, that's great. I'm sure you'll be getting a lot of orders for November as the Man of Promise comes out, which is amazing. And as Ollie posted in the chat as well, we've held back a couple of bottles for Floc Shots tonight. So if you didn't get your hands on one and you wanted to grab a bottle of Floc Shots Batch 4, we've got the early bird special pricing on again. And then there's a couple of bottles of the Port and Sherry Marriage left, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Very few. So we've posted that in the chat as well. If you wanted to grab a bottle of that, I know we didn't try it tonight, but it's excellent.
That was delicious. Yeah, that was yum.
So good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for sharing your whiskey with us. And thank you to everyone who came along tonight. We love it when, there's so much love for a brand, when there's so much chatter, so many amazing questions coming through. So we really appreciate it. And yeah, of course, we really appreciate Mark and Jane joining us tonight. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next one.
I'll just echo those sentiments quickly too. Thanks so much to everyone for coming in tonight and jumping on board. We really appreciate it. We're so grateful for the constant support we get. So it is so much, very much appreciated. So thanks.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Mark and Jane, if you wanted to hang around for a little debrief, but everyone else, have an absolutely wonderful evening. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys. Thank you.